Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Zach Celadonia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and welcome back. It's been a minute. It's been a while. How long has it been? One Zach Flash Celadonia. What's going on, my friend?
Oh, dude, where do I start? Very, very busy in the life of Flash lately. If you can't tell, I'm still not in my basement. I am at a remote location, my guest room, because we are currently undergoing construction downstairs. A lot of renovations. New ceiling, new floor, and on top of that, I am in one of my good friends' groom's parties. He's getting married this weekend.
Oh, wow.
It's my second groom's party I've been a part of in the past, 2 months, maybe a little less.
Yeah.
So that's at the forefront here. And down the street, my car is currently getting 2 new tires, an oil change, and an inspection. So I'm getting stretched every direction right now, man.
And then I got you on too, finally, because our schedules, I've been hopping on jets and all the other stuff all over the place. In fact, I was just telling you the stories from Buffalo because I don't think you've been on since the playoffs, or maybe right before, maybe right after. We had a little bit of hope there, right?
I haven't been on since we lost. I needed to be alone for a little while after that game. Was
it really that bad though? A lot of people were really beat up over it, but I mean, it's you would like to see him. You thought maybe they could win, right? But without TJ Watt, I felt a little less deflated. It was just the way the game started was pretty poor. The fumbles, the turnovers, and whatnot. Then they cleaned it up, and they actually I felt like they finished strong at least this season. They just didn't lay down. But man, some of those other playoff games, they could have went far worse than that. Better too, but
they cut it to 7. They cut it to 7, and at that point I got a little more into it. But the thing was, I was already so out of it by that point, because the beginning of the game and the defense had played so poorly, and they got me back into it kind of when they cut it to within 7 of the Bills. But I still I refrained from getting too excited because I told myself, okay, they cut it to within 7, but I'm not going to cheer. I'm not going to get excited. I'm going to keep sitting right here with my arms crossed, pouting under a blanket until they actually tie it or get ahead. And in hindsight, I should have just enjoyed the moment when they cut it to within 7 because it didn't get better from that point.
That's a very good thing to start with. I know it was a little unscheduled. I'm trying to do the ye ol' topics bar again, but there's something that we should bring up as part of what are the best and worst, Steelers offseason hot takes. And so far, one of the ones that's been driving me up a wall, Zach, is when folks are out there saying that the Steelers had the highest paid defense. Did you feel like the highest paid defense was on the field in Buffalo at any time?
I haven't felt like we have the highest paid defense since that story became a headline.
Yeah, well, and why is that primarily is what I'm getting at. It's it's kind of like the Mike Tomlin had all of this talent and didn't win. And it's that talent has to be on the field in order for that to be a valid comment. I mean, in Buffalo, They don't have TJ Watt. He's the highest paid player on the team, one of the highest paid players in the league on the defensive side of the football. Minka wasn't out there for, 4 straight games. Cam Hayward went on IR right after the first game or so. There was the thing we were just looking at with that Houston Texans loss and a bunch of injuries sustained there. There were guys that were just dropping like flies all over. You lose your inside linebackers. They were down.
I was going to say, Cole Holcomb makes a good penny, too. He makes a decent amount of money, and he was hurt, too.
Yeah. So who was the highest paid players that were left on there? Maybe Larry Ogunjobi?
Yeah.
Patrick Peterson wasn't even a highest paid. He's paid okay, but let's not kid ourselves. So that was one of the things that really kind of drove me crazy with that whole kind of, Tomlin doesn't have the talent. He's losing these playoff games, yada, yada, yada. And you look back on the Killer Bees and it's how many times did they have, and one of those guys' name is going to come up and you'll see at the end of the list with Le'Veon Bell. But, that was the one time that they actually win some games is when Bell was healthy. They go to the AFC title game. They gets hurt in that game and then peters out. Antonio Brown getting knocked out, for Vontaze Burfict or whatnot. Martavis Bryant being on the shelf. Ben even getting hurt in playoff games in Cincinnati where they pull Landry Jones out there. He's taking MMA knee strikes from Burfict or whoever that was like laying on top of him. And it's just, it's kind of a ridiculous thing for people to say. And then when they call into these post-game shows, especially like over the last month of the season and into the playoffs, and they're like, oh, I'm tired of my mediocre Mike. He has all of this talent. And even like NFL Network, I think it was Pat Kerwin, and he goes, do they have talent? Because now he's questioning. It's like people still think of it of like the days of like, Troy Polamalu and James Ferrier and Casey Hampton and guys like that are out there, James Harrison. And it's like, do they still have the same level of talent for that to be a valid statement that he, do we know that some of these guys are talented? Is Levi Wallace a talented player? Is Trenton Thompson, like that's filling in as a safety, and Michael Walker? Are these guys talented players? And even on the offensive side of the ball, you have your own question as to whether or not sometimes some of these guys, they seem to show more. But at the beginning of the season, could you have said, George Pickens is talented because he makes like a Matrix style catch every now and then, but can you truly have called him a talented player when he wasn't even having 100-yard games? That's kind of like a tough thing to hang on Tomlin's head there. Like when you have a mixed bag that's out there, you're pulling guys off the street.
Definitely. Yeah. I think the defense is rather under-talented nowadays because it's headlined by TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Cam Hayward. Well, we just saw probably almost definitely the most injured those three have been together at once this past season. You lost Cole Holcomb, who you brought in as your desired linebacker one. He was making the most money. He gets hurt. And the offense is more like there's so much untapped potential and there's so much youth. And at times they perform like a talented group. But just to simplify it, looking at the AFC North alone, we're one of the least talented, I feel like, rosters as it stands right now. The Browns are star-studded, it seems like. So are the Ravens, and the Bengals have one of the most exciting, best offenses of recent memory. Not this past year because Joe Burrow got hurt, but yeah, the Tomlin not maximizing his talent thing, it's kind of been a dead argument, I feel like, or an empty statement these past few years in particular, because the talent on this team hasn't really gotten much better past the big three of TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, and Minkah Fitzpatrick. And when you lose one of those guys or multiple guys, you see how untalented the defense truly is. There's pieces to be excited about. Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton come to mind right away, obviously. But they're not the same group that they were, like you mentioned, in Tomlin's early days or even during the days of the Killer Bees. Like, they're a very different team on defense and offense. The offense has potential to get there, but it's still a lot of unproven, untapped potential. George Pickens eclipsing 1,000 yards, that's a big deal, sure. Najee and Jalen Warren are a good 1-2 punch. Our offensive line is getting there, but I don't think anybody would look at the Steelers' offense, quarterback or not, and be like, yeah, that's a top 10 offense right now. We're fighting to break that barrier still.
Yeah, that's a good place to go with. Quarterback is definitely the one that sticks out to me. It's like, is anyone going to really argue that Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph is like this top level talent? Tomlin's wasting talent. Why didn't he play Rudolph sooner? It's like, okay, well, they got lucky in a little ways. They, tailored the offense to what Rudolph could do well. And beyond that, they were able to win some games. And I think a lot of that does come down to coaching and being able to get the most out of some of the guys that you have out there on the field, even if they're not top flight players. I mean, this guy's quarterback 3. He was barely still in the league last year. The Steelers are the only team that gave him any kind of sniff towards anything. So, that it is a quarterback driven league, Zach. But I look around, I made these comments about, the postseason. Most of the quarterbacks in the postseason are barely throwing about 250-ish, a touchdown a piece, maybe 2. I think Baker might have been one of the only guys who threw like 3 touchdowns in a game the entire postseason. There were, other than, CJ Stroud, I'm talking about like divisional and the championship rounds, the last 2 rounds. It was a lot of defense. You take a look, it's Kansas City and Baltimore. That was defense and defense. Those defenses were clashing. And same on the other side, Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell, hello, defense. And despite, Kyle Shanahan being this bright offensive mind, 49ers still bring it with the defense too. And they're going to have to do that in the Super Bowl. So a lot of this is what we're going to say about quarterbacks. So let's start with the guys that are, I guess we'll say currently there. We know Mason Rudolph's scheduled to be an unrestricted free agent. Kenny Pickett entering year 3 of his rookie deal. How much faith do you still have in going forward with these two guys? I've kind of spoken ad nauseum about this a few episodes ago and also with Brian, so I'll leave my opinions mostly reserved, but I'm still optimistic that we might not have seen the ceiling from either one of these quarterbacks, and I would be completely content with going into 2024 if these were the two guys you had to rely on from training camp and beyond.
Well, yeah, I think that's the most likely scenario. I'm going to continue to squat on this take that we got into this the last time I was on, I think. I've definitely gotten into it a lot on Twitter, but the most likely quarterback room of 2024 involves Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph coming back, and then either a journeyman like Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew or Joe Flacco, or a mid-round pick to come in and provide some honest competition. But I don't, faith is a funny word because I do have faith to an extent in both Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph to an extent. I think because we've seen good play out of Kenny Pickett at times, sometimes great play. And I'm not talking about the preseason. I'm talking about his rookie year, the few times where he was able to will the Steelers to victory late in the fourth quarter in the Baltimore game on the road, in the Raiders game at home, honoring Franco Harris. His last start of the season, he outdueled Deshaun Watson at home and outperformed him against the Browns and put the Steelers in a position to be in the playoffs, but they needed help, I believe, from the Jets, and they didn't get it, so that they missed out. And yeah, then the preseason, but Kenny has shown flashes at times to where you can see, if you want to, you can see what the Steelers are seeing. They could move on, but I don't think he's performed bad enough to definitively say, all right, let's cut bait, let's go with somebody else. They have reason to believe, whether it's a lot or a little, they have reason to believe Kenny Pickett can be their guy in 2024. Mason took his opportunity and ran with it. He also showed the ability to be a stable starting quarterback. He won us 3 games, performed about as well as you could imagine for a guy who's quarterback 3 and a guy who has taken his lumps throughout his career. And I think just based off of what I know about the Steelers and how they make moves, but they're still a conservative bunch at heart. They've grown and they've evolved under Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, and towards the end of Colbert's final years, to go out and sign more extravagant free agents and make trades. But it just feels very Steelers for them to go into 2024 with Kenny and Mason, and then third quarterback to be named later as the competition. The idea that they would go out and get somebody who would be the immediate starter over the two of them doesn't jive with what Art Rooney has said or what Tomlin has said or what Arthur Smith has said. Arthur Smith, the Steelers' new offensive coordinator, he did a sit-down interview with Missy Matthews, and it sure as hell seems like he has intentions to build a relationship with Kenny Pickett and get to know Kenny Pickett and figure out what he likes to do well, what he doesn't like to do. Like, that seems to be on Arthur Smith's mind, put there assumingly from Mike Tomlin or the Rooneys or Khan. Believe me, the Steelers want Kenny Pickett to be successful. When you hear people throw around the term, they're going to give this kid every chance he can to succeed. That is about players like Kenny Pickett to a T, because the Steelers have invested a first-round pick in him. It is a reflection on the franchise. It's a reflection on Tomlin. They want him to do well. If he doesn't do well, if he's playing bad, they're not going to ignore it. They'll take him out, but he's going to be given every chance to be the starter. So I don't think they would go out and get a guy who wouldn't be competition, but would more so have the job right away. I'm talking about guys like Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. If they go out and they try to pay a guy like Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson what he will demand on the open market, that guy's your starter. You can't sell to the fan base, yeah, we're paying Kirk Cousins $30 million for one season, and he might be the starter, might not. Russell Wilson, same deal. Justin Fields would require a second-round pick, maybe a third and a future third, but that's high draft capital that in giving that away, that guy would be your presumed starter. Also, kind of relevant to the point, I don't think the Steelers are a good enough team right now to surrender draft capital that would be required to get Justin Fields. They need their picks. The Steelers are in the quietest, most subtle rebuild, I think, in the NFL, because they're not a bad team. They're good enough to compete for a playoff spot. They're good enough to compete in the division, but there are a lot of holes. And even though they're not a bad team, they're not scraping the bottom of the barrel, they still have enough room for improvement where it doesn't make sense for them short term or long term to surrender picks to acquire a new quarterback. It's written on the wall for everybody. It's going to be Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and a journeyman or a draft pick. Anything else at this point would be a real shock.
Going back to, I'll rewind a second to signing quarterbacks, because I wanted to go through the list with you as far as like journeyman versus like an actual starter. Of course, Fields and Wilson are still under contract and would require trade capital, like you said, and that's another whole topic. For me, though, somebody like Mason Rudolph, guy comes in, hasn't thrown a pass for 2 years, and all of a sudden it's like he still looks like he could play at a high level. Open up some eyes, you know what I mean? And it's not somebody you got to kind of like retrain to do the job, you know what I mean? I know it'll be a new offensive coordinator, but he's already got familiarity with the different various like skill position players and whatnot. So let me take a look at this list. Let's run through it real quick, Zach. And signing a quarterback, of course, you got to look at, is this guy the future for what it costs and even what their age is? And you've already brought up Kirk Cousins, for example, and 36 years old. I'm not all out on Kirk Cousins. I think he's a fine quarterback, but for what the Steelers are probably going to need to do, or what they're going to have, like there's going to be some really tight sacrifices. What people don't realize right now is like Brock Purdy. Oh, well, you could get the next Brock Purdy. It's like, yeah, it's nice for the 49ers. They didn't have all this money spread out in a very expensive quarterback. Didn't even when Jimmy G was there. He was, at first in his contract kind of wasn't as big, but they put a whole lot of eggs in that basket and didn't necessarily work out. They're lucky they got Brock Purdy that came around and is able to execute this offense, because now they could spend a lot of money to put other guys around them.
Well, that's what it is. Is luck. It's luck. Anybody that's suggesting the Steelers can go out and get the next Brock Purdy in the draft, I don't know how else you could like. It's luck, dude. That is pure luck. If the Niners or anybody knew Brock Purdy could do what he's doing, and help steer a team to the Super Bowl and play well, he wouldn't have lasted to the Mr. Irrelevant pick.
I know.
This happens all the time. People are like, oh, why don't they take a shot on this guy? He could be the next this guy. It's like, if the NFL world knew that this kid was going to be that, he wouldn't have lasted that long in the draft. And Purdy's an extreme example. But Cousins, that applies to Kirk Cousins too. He also was like a 4th-round pick. Yes. Nobody thought he would be this great. And I think Kirk Cousins is phenomenal for what he is, but he's going to cost way too much money, and the Steelers aren't in a position to give him what he would demand. He's a Hall of Fame bag getter. Like, yes. He's made so much money in his career that the idea that he would just, take a 1-year, $15 million deal to come play for the Steelers is so out there to me. I don't see that as a plausible reality. He is very good, but he's going to cost a lot of money, which the Steelers don't have. And also, a team that brings in Kirk Cousins, that team is saying to their fan base, we think we're a quarterback away. We're a quarterback away from a championship. I don't necessarily think the Steelers fall under that category right now. They have more holes they need to fill than just quarterback.
Correct. And Kirk Cousins, you see how his contract, $35 million per year on average, how that's handicapped the Minnesota Vikings from, being able to spend in free agency or even retain some of their own high picks, etc. And another guy that falls in this category around 30 million that I wouldn't be paying for, that I saw some clickbait article from one of these Steelers sites pop out. Steelers might show interest in Ryan Tannehill. I'm like, get the hell out of here. Like, why? Just because Arthur Smith became the OC? That's dumb. Let's go through the rest of these, though. Like Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett's a guy like him, Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, Sam Darnold. These are guys that maybe you bring in, but they're more in the backup class. I'm like, are they going to come in and be a QB3? Are they really serious competition as a backup quarterback if you don't have Mason? Like, I'm advocating for, Mason and Kenny to come in and basically split starting reps in a competition. I think that's definitely where it needs to be. It's
counterproductive for sure.
Yeah.
Pardon me, and can be detrimental. That's the cusp of how complicated this quarterback controversy truly is, because you're exactly right. I think I already touched on, I don't see them bringing in somebody who's going to be the automatic starter, because they said they want competition. They want Kenny Pickett to succeed. Mason Rudolph, in a twist of fate, is like the perfect guy to compete with Kenny Pickett, because he can be your starter, he can be your backup, but he isn't going to automatically have the job. But in doing this quarterback competition they're going to ensue in camp, you're going to be taking reps away from whoever the ultimate starter is. So the Steelers are in a really tough position. And that's why they have to look at all these names and weigh the pros and the cons. Like, yeah, a guy like Tyrod Taylor or Jacoby Brissett, they don't really move the needle much, but I don't think the Steelers want to move the needle much, because they can't bring in a guy who's just going to be the starter. They want somebody to come in and compete for the job, not just win it outright or just be given it outright. So it's tough. It's like you're trying to find a guy who's kind of good, but not that good, but good enough to push.
Yeah, well, here's the rest of the list for that, because none of those names do anything for me, and definitely not. Brissett made $8 million last year. Mariota's never done anything for me. Let's see. Drew Lock, probably not. Jameis Winston, probably not. Baker Mayfield.
I'll argue on Winston. I like Jameis Winston, dude. He's still good.
He's so good that he can't beat out Derek Carr. They had to bring in Derek Carr. They couldn't have just stuck with Winston. I seriously thought that's what the Saints were going to do, but they have their own.
Saints are a mess, dude. They're a terribly ran organization. So I'm not going to give them credit for not starting Jameis Winston.
You took that.
We all were calling for that.
Right out of my mouth. Like, I was literally, like, the lips were coming together. One of those like letters that your lips come together for to say mess. They are just they've been a dumpster fire. Like, you talk about the Steelers and try and say with talent. Now, I know I rag on Carr, but you look at all the wide receivers the Saints had. You have Alvin Kamara. Like, what on earth are you doing like there? There's proven commodities. Like, at least in the Steelers case, like, I'm saying that, like, Pickens isn't yet, he's not proven. That's what we're saying. These are green, raw guys that still have potential, but they're inexperienced in the NFL. Like, Kamara he's a commodity, you know what I mean? And it's the same thing when you're down in LA with the Chargers, like Austin Eckler. What's going on? You got Keenan Allen, guys like that. Crazy.
The Saints were the one team giving the Steelers a run for their money. With, like, I noticed, like, the general public, everybody was making fun of the Steelers offense, rightfully so. But the Saints were right there with them, with, like, just the frustrating play calls and the not maximizing their playmakers' potential. Like, they were right there with the Steelers just as far as being a total mess. But sorry, go on with the list of
no problem. We'll bang these out real quick, because I don't think Baker Mayfield's going anywhere anytime soon. Gardner Minshew's an interesting case study, because he wasn't really intended to be the guy, especially after they drafted Richardson. He's like one of these guys, like where the Steelers took Trubisky and then drafted Pickett. It's kind of like the same. I've never been a huge Minshew fan to begin with. Teddy Bridgewater is on this list. He's announcing his retirement. Tyler Huntley, I'd be surprised if, like, Baltimore, somebody's going to take a stab. He's firmly a backup territory. Then you got Joe Flacco, Josh Dobbs. Then you get into, like, Easton Stick, Nate Sudfeld, Blaine Gabbert, Carson Wentz, Kyle Allen, Brandon Allen, and Trevor Siemian, A.J. McCarron. Josh Johnson hasn't played for the Steelers yet. Maybe that could be, like, his 18th team in the NFL that he gets and I could see the Steelers doing that if it was, like, a QB3. Josh Johnson, now, it's surprising. He's 38 years old now. And you want to talk about he's not Hall of Famer for getting the bag. He's a Hall of Famer for just getting a bag.
Yeah. I think he played under John Gruden in Tampa Bay. That's how old he is.
Yeah. He's been around for a minute. But all those names, I'm on record saying I'd bring somebody like Josh Dobbs back because he's a smart dude, and you could probably throw him out there in a pinch, and you don't need to take any major reps away from anybody in order to do so. But that's about it, for when it comes to all the names that are going to hit actual free agency here. We were starting to you were heading in this direction about trading for a quarterback, and I'm totally not on board with that. Like, Justin Fields to me is the same guy as Kenny Pickett for the most part for what they've done on the field. Everybody thinks like you put the Steelers jersey on, they look at somebody else from another team and they're like, oh, former first round pick. They put the Superman cape on that Steelers jersey and they turn into Superman. And it's like, no, it's just some cosplayer at the Comic-Con or whatever. It's really not. Like, I don't see. What I don't want to do is like, he's in the last year of his rookie deal, somebody like Justin Fields, which means you got a 5th-year option. It's going to cost a lot more money, and he's going to want a bigger deal. And how do you adequately evaluate somebody like that if you put him into a competition? I think he's like the one guy, like you said, if you bring somebody like that in, maybe he's not firmly like anointed the starter right away. But man, I have a hard time trying to give up draft picks. Like you said, there's other areas I think where this team improves, like offensive line, for example, that helps the quarterback position. And then you could better evaluate somebody like Pickett or Rudolph.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you on Dobbs. That's what I was trying to get at is you want to look at this list and try to find the few names that like stick out as a guy who can start, but won't necessarily be the presumed and assumed starter from being signed. You mentioned that some of these names don't do anything for you. Well, I don't think you want them to do anything for you. Like these guys are meant to be competition for Kenny and Mason if Mason comes back, not be the assumed starter. So I would take Dobbs. I would take Flacco's a funny one, but I don't know if he'd want to come and like just you have to remember these guys aren't going to go anywhere to be a starter. Like nobody's going to bring in Flacco to be the starter. Nobody's going to bring in Mariota. I don't want Mariota at all, but like these are names that like they're on this list because they're journeymen. They're going to go to a team where I can't see anybody on that list, not Cousins or Russell Wilson or Fields, but all the other names. Nobody's going to go anywhere and be a starter. They're all going to have to compete no matter where they go. Gardner Minshew just made the Pro Bowl, but the Pro Bowl's a joke now. So what does that really mean? But he's one of the more talented names on the list. The Tannehill thing is funny because, of course, you understand why that connection was made. He is Arthur Smith's quarterback from the time that he was OC in Tennessee, a very successful offensive coordinator. So the connection is there. But as far as the fit and the talent level, I don't know. Tannehill kind of falls into the category of a guy who's going to have to compete for a job. But I feel like we witnessed the rise and fall of Ryan Tannehill before our eyes. I think there was very good reason why he lost his job to Will Levis in Tennessee. And he had that magical ride, again, with Arthur Smith. But as soon as Arthur Smith left, he wasn't the same Tannehill. Arthur Smith helped get him a big contract. He helped reestablish respect for Ryan Tannehill in the NFL. But I think it's just more than anything else, it's just an easy connection people can see between Smith and Tannehill, why they draw that bridge between the two between the Steelers and Ryan Tannehill. I wouldn't necessarily be looking for it, but he in a weird way, he fits on the list of names that he could be a quarterback the Steelers bring in to play, but wouldn't be the starter right away. You see, it's a very niche thing that the Steelers are looking for here at quarterback, and that has caused a huge rift and so much disconnect in the fan base. It's why you have everybody every day arguing about, well, we should go get Kirk Cousins. We should go get Russell Wilson. No, let's get this guy. It's that guy. We all can do that and list names of who we want. But the thing I like to do is listen to the Steelers and what they have to say. And it really doesn't seem like they're going to be in the market for a guy like Cousins or a guy who's just going to be the new quarterback right away. They have a plan in place, and it involves Kenny Pickett and Mason if he is resigned.
Well, not only that, Pickett and Mason are much younger. I mean, Kirk Cousins is 36. Russell Wilson's 36 years old. These guys.
That's the quarterback away thing too. Yeah, we're not a quarterback away, I don't think.
Yeah, like they've got 2-3 seasons if they're even playing the best ball that they've been playing. Cousins coming off of major injury. I don't think that somebody like Russell Wilson, if he becomes available, is at the top of his game right now. And neither is Tannehill. Tannehill is slid. He's back to double-digit picks. The only way I see him coming in is if you can't give him as much money even as Mitchell Trubisky, but I think he's probably in that category. If he's going to be a backup, he's got to be making probably about 8 to 10 million a season. And that's kind of money they may have to offer up if they want to keep Mason Rudolph. You're not going to have 3 quarterbacks making that much money. Excuse me. But where Tannehill might fit in is that he was an Arthur Smith guy. He could be a player coach and maybe help mentor Kenny, but firmly as a backup. You bring him in and you start muddling with whether or not he could be a starter, and you put him in, you get the same kind of mess that got Mike Vrabel fired down in Tennessee. Yeah. So I don't see it. Furthermore, one of the things I think we should also bring up too is we started talking about like draft. And like, there's people out there that already want the Steelers to go and get, hey, Bo Nix might be available. Like, and magically these guys, when they're available in the 2nd or 3rd round, Zach, they're going to be the guy after they're like the 8th quarterback that's taken. After you already hated on Mason Rudolph, a 3rd round guy that was the 6th quarterback taken in his draft class for so long, you're going to get like the same kind of guy or worse. They might not be even as good in our short little whatever window that we've seen, even with Mason or even with Kenny. You might not get anything better in that category. I mean, look at Malik Willis. Look at Desmond Ridder right now. These guys like struggle like hell. They're not very good. Very few quarterbacks taken outside of the 1st round succeed. And we know that even a 1st round pick isn't necessarily a lock to be good. So when I look at people are saying Michael Penix. Like, I really don't know where he falls. Let's wait and see, because the combine's going to happen, pro days are going to happen, and stuff like that. That dude could be in the 1st round. It's like right now everybody's throwing out mock drafts, and they're just like, oh, well, you know what? I don't like this guy as much. Penix will be a 2nd round pick. You don't know that. You don't know what these teams are going to value these guys at. And it doesn't necessarily mean that's where the Steelers should go to muddy the waters. Yeah, let's use another high round. Let's bring back Rudolph and then have Pickett. And then let's bring in let's burn a draft pick on a guy. Unless it like absolutely is somebody that falls in your lap, then, I think they got to focus in other places with their draft capital. Maybe if they get like a late round pick, then that's your distant guy. That's like your emergency quarterback, developmental type player that then everybody will be crying, kicking and screaming for if Pickett, Rudolph, etc. doesn't work out.
So I'm struggling to zero in on what you're looking for, you personally, because it seems like you don't want a journeyman to come in as competition, but you don't want a draft pick either. So what is your, is it just Josh Dobbs? Is it Josh Dobbs or bust for you as far as
no, because I'm not totally on his train either, but like if you were able to get like a Jacoby Brissett to be a firm quarterback 3, like I'm talking about a competition. I just want 2 guys. I don't want the 3-headed monster they had 2 camps ago. They're splitting all these reps. You got a brand new OC. It's just, I don't think that does any good for anybody. If you get a player coach type like Tannehill and you're pretty much just hitching your saddles to Pickett, I think where we're at right now is like Pickett, it's 2 years. It's not a full 2 seasons. Quarterbacks struggle through their 1st year, definitely through their 2nd year. You call last year an extension of the same year. Now, if Pickett could stay healthy and stay on the field, and we can get an actual evaluation of him, and with an offensive coordinator, not Matt Canada, that obviously is trash and it didn't do him any favors. You just never know. I don't like recycling quarterbacks. I don't like spending any high draft capital when you've just done this. You went and got a recycled guy with Mitch Trubisky. You spent a high pick on Kenny Pickett. It doesn't mean that it's automatically success. You took the guy, Mason Rudolph, and spent a mid-rounder and developed him. It's like, okay, let's see what these guys could do since you already have like some eggs in a basket there. What I don't want to do is like Wilson, he's going to maybe cost whatever in a trade, cost whatever money. Same with Cousins. And they're 37 years old. That doesn't represent the future. You're right back in this same situation a few years from now. And like you said, this isn't like the Denver Broncos when they signed Peyton Manning and they're just that guy away. not to mention that Peyton Manning is up here and Russell Wilson and somewhere down here right now. It's not the same kind of guy where you're going to go out and have the most explosive offense ever, 50-some touchdowns. You have that 3-year window where you make the Super Bowl twice and win one. Now look where they've been since then. Like they haven't been able to do. They've tried everything too. You just look at the Denver Broncos process and hope, knock on wood, that you don't end up the same way. Does that give you more clarity then?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, because I wanted to figure out like where your head was at, because we're pretty aligned in this, because I think anybody who just listened to us go through that list of quarterbacks that are available on the market can gain a sense and understand and see that none of these names are really that inspiring to me. They're all the same kind of guy at different stages in their career. They're all going to have to compete for a job wherever they go. None of them have had like the craziest amount of success besides Joe Flacco when he was younger. But I personally, if you're asking me what I think will happen and what I want to happen, it's pretty parallel. And what I want is, and what I think will happen, as mentioned, is it's going to be Kenny and Mason brought back. And instead of bringing in a guy who's a journeyman and will take reps away from Kenny and Mason and muddy the waters and could just be Mitch Trubisky 2.0 at this stage in his career, I personally would take a 4th or 5th round quarterback, whoever's there, and just bring that guy as the third guy to camp. Because the idea that guy is going to actually beat out Kenny and Mason is very, very, very slim. And he's not going to cost a lot of money. They probably won't give him like the most amount of reps in the world. It won't be like Chris Oladokun, where they took him in the 7th and he got like no reps all camp. You take a guy in the 4th or the 5th, that guy's going to at least get to have the 3rd team reps a lot of the time. He'll maybe get a chance doing 7 shots. Like, you're going to get to see a 4th or 5th round pick in practice actually do something, but not cost money and not put unnecessary pressure on Mason and Kenny and not take reps away from them. That is kind of going along with what I was saying earlier, that we are in such a unique spot, and the guy that the Steelers need to bring in it's such a niche, like it's so specific. And of all the options we've listed and gone over here, the most logical one to me, and the one that I hope happens and think will happen, is Kenny Mason and a mid-round pick. When I say mid-round pick, I mean like 4th to 6th. The 3rd is a little rich for me. I've heard the same stuff about Michael Penix Jr. I kind of agree with the party that thinks he's going to fall farther than most believe because of his injury history and his age. But that turns me off as well. Just because he's going to fall to the 2nd or the 3rd round doesn't mean I want to take him because he's there. So I think he'll fall, but that's not who I'm looking for the Steelers to go after. There's quite a few mid-round names that could be there for them to pick and bring in as QB3, guy to have some reps, but not think that he's going to take the job from anybody, like Michael Pratt or Spencer Rattler, like those kinds of names.
Yeah. Well, where I'm at too is I want to be clear about Ryan Tannehill, because he was good with Arthur Smith, and he knows Arthur Smith's system, and he might be able to help mentor a younger quarterback. I don't see any kind of like light at the end of the tunnel that says Tannehill would come in and be quarterback 3. That's one thing. And number 2 is like, what kind of offers will he get? Will somebody that's still quarterback needy or want a plug and play backup?
I think if Mason's here, Tannehill won't be. If Mason leaves, that opens the door for Tannehill.
He would be a prime candidate, but you just can't you're not throwing $30 million at Ryan Tannehill. He's taking a significant cut in pay, and probably any kind of opportunity to even be a starter any further. Like, I look at all the teams in the NFL, right? We could go through some names maybe real quick, and usually just by division if I could pull them up, because I don't want to miss anybody. I can go off the top of my head. Let's see here. Bills, you know what I mean? Yeah, he'd be a backup. He's not going back to Miami. The Jets, be the terrible team to be at. New England's probably looking for another quarterback with a new coach. Baltimore's not looking. Cleveland's not looking. Steelers, we just talked about them. Bengals, I don't know. They got Jake Browning as exclusive rights. Houston just has C.J. Stroud. Jacksonville has their guy. Indianapolis has their guy. Tennessee's going to move forward with Levis, right? Kansas City has their guy. Raiders. Could always be interesting. You never know. They may be drafting somebody. Denver's going to be looking. But they're not looking for these guys to be starters. So they might have like this opportunity where bring in like a veteran type guy. Let's see. Chargers, Cowboys, Eagles, Giants. Commanders. Yuck. Oof. Cliff Kingsbury, really? Like that's where he's headed there to that dumpster fire. You got the Lions.
They say it's because they think they're in striking distance of Williams.
Caleb
Williams.
Of course. That's the only thing that would make sense, and that would be to bolster. Of course, you got to bolster for. I think Steelers are doing really with Arthur Smith. They're really trying to build up Kenny Pickett. We're going to talk about Arthur here in a second. Packers, Vikings. It depends if Cousins stays there. Bears are in like the power play position here. They could stick with Fields, or they could go for Williams or somebody else at the top of the draft, depending if they trade out. Buccaneers, depends if they bring Mayfield back. Saints are probably stuck with Carr for now. Atlanta's probably looking for a guy. Carolina is stuck with their guy, Bryce Young, for now because they blew all their draft capital. What else are they going to do? Sign somebody like that. 49ers got their guy. They're in the Super Bowl. So Rams got Stafford. They were in the Super Bowl recently. Seattle with Geno Smith. Never know. Different Pete Carroll kind of eras over there. And then Arizona with Kyler Murray. So there's not like a whole lot of open spots. It's the same argument I made for like Mason Rudolph. You know what I mean? Where's Tannehill going on that? Who's offering him a lot of money? Nobody's really offering Rudolph a lot of money either. I just think I've been talking about how Trubisky is probably not the best influence watching him, or he might be a nice guy and have all the well intentions, and who knows, he could be one of these guys that shows up a bit and he's an offensive coordinator like a lot of backup quarterbacks or failed quarterbacks end up being in the league. He might be very smart, but I also see some bad habits and stuff that seems like it translates over to Kenny. You need a guy that's going to be like Tannehill would be that guy if he were cheap enough to be like, okay, this is really what our new offensive coordinator means. He wants you to, 3-step here, do this, turn this way. Hey, you know what? Don't get happy feet. Don't you feel a little bit of pressure? Stand tall in the pocket. I think that's what really.
I'm not that sour on Tannehill,
like
honestly. I think the jokes
it's the cost. It's the cost. That's what I'm trying to come back around to.
It's the cost, and it's the Mason thing too. It's like you said, and I believe this was a really good point. I don't think he's going to be open to coming in here and possibly being QB3. So. A domino has to fall before the Tannehill to Pittsburgh trilogy or story begins, and that domino is Mason Rudolph. If Mason Rudolph comes back, the chances of him not at least being QB2 are very low. So I think if Mason leaves, the Tannehill connection makes a lot of sense, but if he doesn't, it almost makes no sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a guy that threw 55 touchdowns in 2 years. I mean, I see Mike Tomlin and company. Mike Tomlin is a guy who likes his veteran quarterbacks, but we should also point out that Mason Rudolph is an experienced backup quarterback. It's a little bit of experience, but it's not like he's never taken a snap. And that's where you're not going to take a mid-round guy to compete with Kenny. You're not going to take. I don't think you take anybody that's a rookie. They're going to have somebody experienced. It's either going to be Rudolph. It could be like a Tannehill. So with the third pick, with QB3, and let's say you take like a later round pick, I'm cool with that. And the reason Oladokin didn't get any snaps is because they had 3 other guys. He was firmly a 4. So they'll just bring in like a Tanner Morgan or somebody like that that's coming from Slippery Rock or somebody like that, and they're not going to see a whole lot of time on the field. So speaking of, we brought up his name several times here, and I wanted to get your thoughts on Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, because there's a lot of people that are Debbie Downers about this. And I mean, I thought it was very firm, just in the same way that you're hearing like Rooney and Tomlin and those guys saying, hey, we want to bring Mason Rudolph back. It's like, yeah, they're definitely expressing interest, dude. That's why they're coming right out and saying it. Well, they wanted somebody that is an experienced offensive coordinator and play caller. And if they promoted from within, everyone would have had their panties in a wad. So they go out and they get a guy that now has also head coaching experience. I thought Mike Tomlin didn't do these things. He feels threatened by people that could possibly take his job. But now you're going to get an outside perspective, and everybody's just like, it's not like the Falcons are a very stable franchise to begin with. And if you look at some of the things Arthur Smith did there, a lot of it is quarterback driven. So if they do struggle, and the Steelers do struggle, this is part of the reason why I'm okay with Pickett Rudolph as like a the two guys going in too. Because if they struggle again, now you know for sure neither one of these guys are the guy. We move on. We start over in 2025. Maybe the Steelers, Mike Tomlin has his first losing season. They draft higher. They're within within reach, maybe if they want to get one of these like names that are out there, et cetera, et cetera. And I think part of this starts with Arthur Smith, Kenny, all these guys, short leash. Here's your new offensive coordinator. I hate guys having to learn like a whole new system and this and that, but you saw that Arthur Smith was able to get the most out of. We were just ragging on how Tannehill was, bad outside of Arthur Smith, and you saw that he got the most out of him. We saw Mike Sullivan get the most out of Mason Rudolph during this run to the playoffs. With, I think the brain trust that's there would be capable of tailoring the offense to the player as opposed to just forcing it, which is usually the problem with a lot of these coaches. So I think it's a good hire. It reminds me a lot of Todd Haley. Todd Haley had failed in Kansas City as a head coach and then came over to Pittsburgh, brought his experience over, and he was once the hot name before failing as a head coach, just like Arthur Smith was in the offensive ranks. Good hire for the Steelers.
Yeah, Debbie Downers, dude, in Pittsburgh, in this town, and the Pittsburgh media didn't like something the Steelers did. That can't be true. But yeah, I like it. I like it. I think it's a good signing. I think it's a good hiring. The Todd Haley thing does come to mind almost immediately. Like you said, failed head coach. Not like he was the worst head coach in the world, but a prolific, great offensive coordinator. And I don't use those terms lightly. He really was a great offensive coordinator. The Titans in 2020, they were first in offensive plays over 50 yards, big plays. They were first in goal-to-go scoring. I don't know what that means necessarily, but it correlates with they were second in red zone touchdowns. 74% of the time the Titans were in the red zone, they scored a touchdown. They averaged 385 yards per game, which ranked fifth in the NFL out of 32 teams. They averaged 29.6, so 30 points per game in the NFL in 2020, which ranked fourth during that time over the whole league. Nearly two 1,000-yard receivers, A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, think George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and the Titans in a 2-year span under Arthur Smith being offensive coordinator. They eclipsed 400 yards 15 times in a 2-year span. The Steelers did that once in like a 4-year span, however long it was. I try not to think about it too much, but that was one of the hot topics of Pittsburgh was when will they ever cross 400 yards again? Will we ever see that in our lifetimes? Arthur Smith did it 15 times with a equally, if not less, talented Titans offense than what he's been given here with the Steelers. And that's what you want. Like his track record as offensive coordinator is good. These are real numbers that I just read off to the people here. And I think everybody, myself very much included, so I'm not excluded from this, but we all got carried away and very excited about the idea of the hot young name coming in here, the Shanahan McVay coaching tree guy, the guy who is still a fresh 30-year-old. Well, Arthur Smith is only 41 years old. I mean, the gray hair does him no favors, but he's not an old guy by any stretch of the imagination. He's actually rather young per NFL coaching standards. And
experienced for that age as well.
And yeah, very experienced for that age. And I think the idea of the Shanahan McVay coaching tree guy is all well and good, and it is exciting. But the Steelers didn't go completely in the opposite direction. They got a good offensive mind and a still rather young offensive mind. Nobody knows if a lot of these McVay Shanahan guys are going to be any good because a lot of them were given their first opportunity to be OCs now in the NFL. I'm talking about guys like Zach Robinson, Clint Kubiak's going to get his second stint. But, if you zoom out, this is a good example of just how different and how alike actually every NFL fan base is. When the Saints announced the hiring of Clint Kubiak, a lot of Saints fans on Twitter were not happy. They wanted a guy with more experience. They wanted a guy who has a proven good track record, a guy like Arthur Smith. So just classic NFL fans wanting what they weren't given. And the grass is always greener over there at the other franchises, and they all know what they're doing. And I'll say this too. Yeah, the Falcons weren't a great experience for Arthur Smith. Could have gone worse, but he didn't have a quarterback the whole time. And any NFL team, any offense is going to struggle without a good quarterback. And you could put some blame on Smith for that, for not getting anybody better than Desmond Ridder or Tyler Heineke. But the idea that he didn't know how to use his playmakers, that's already been proven false per his offensive coordinator track record in Tennessee. But Kyle Pitts, right? Everybody loves talking about Kyle Pitts, the tight end for the Falcons. They drafted top 5. So underused, right? He had 90 targets last year. Drake London had over 100 targets last year. And Bijan Robinson averaged 4 less touches per game than Christian McCaffrey. 4 less touches. That's achieved in a single drive of offense. It's 2 carries and 2 catches, or 3 carries and 1 catch. They used their playmakers plenty. But because the Falcons were so shitty, and I think the Kyle Pitts stuff kind of carries over from his rookie year, because he was overdrafted in the first place. So no matter what they do with Kyle Pitts, he's always going to be viewed as like not getting enough targets. But it just factually isn't true. And when the Steelers made this move and they announced Arthur Smith, so many people were so quick to be like, oh, well, he didn't use his guys in Atlanta. There's a reason he got fired in Atlanta. And the Derrick Henry thing, oh, you're going to give him credit for Derrick Henry. Everybody crying about Derrick Henry in Tennessee, they're acting like the Steelers don't have Ren and Stimpy at running back. They have Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. That's a good group. That's a good 1-2 punch, arguably one of the best in the NFL. So I think, people had their idea of what they wanted in a Steelers offensive coordinator. And for whatever reason, Arthur Smith doesn't meet some of those aspirations and desires and dreams. But all it takes is a little bit of Googling, a little bit of your own research to see that this guy has a proven track record of success as an offensive coordinator. He knows how to use his weapons. He knows how to get the most out of guys that are struggling in their careers, like Ryan Tannehill, Kenny Pickett, A.J. Brown, George Pickens. Like it's all there. Like there's, in my opinion, there's no reason to not be optimistic about this hire. But that's just what people do. I think there are some people that have come around and seem a little bit more inviting of the hire, and some people aren't going to be happy and they aren't going to stop bitching until the Steelers eclipse 30 points for like 5 games in a row. Then those people might admit they were wrong. Maybe. Probably not.
Points is more important because everyone's talking about quarterbacking and they want Kenny to go out there and throw 4 and 5 TDs a game. And I think I keep bringing up how that's just unrealistic. The football game or the video game, John Madden type numbers. You don't get that type of stuff in the NFL regularly. You just seen it in the playoffs.
Few and far between.
Very few and far between. But with a running game, when you have Derrick Henry run the ball for 3,500 plus yards and 33 touchdowns in your 2 years as offensive coordinator. Now, I know I sent this to you on Twitter, and it was from something I wrote last week about not wanting 3 specific quarterbacks, including Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and Kirk Cousins for various reasons that we mentioned throughout this show. And what I said some last week maybe as well. But Justin Fields failed to throw multiple touchdown passes in 21 of his last 28 games and only had 1 game over 300 yards passing. I don't think that befits an Arthur Smith type offense. If you can get this dude to just stand in the pocket a little more and not use his feet, perhaps. But you take a look at Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill had 28 games, same number of games, right? I'm stats whoring for you. Let's do some maths with Joe. 28 games. He had 8 games with 3 or more touchdown passes, and he had 8 games with only fewer than 2 touchdown passes. So that means in 21, there's that math again, 21 of the 28 games he played, 75%, he had thrown at least 2 or more touchdown passes with Arthur Smith as his offensive coordinator. That's why I have optimism. I think Kenny could do that. I think Mason could do that. I don't see Ryan Tannehill as this elite quarterback. If he was an elite quarterback, he wouldn't have, like you said, lost his job in those spots that he did, injury or otherwise.
Very, very similar skill-wise to Kenny Pickett. And Mason, too, just like with a better running ability. But the parallels between Tannehill and Kenny, there's actually a good bit. Like whether it's their first draft pedigree and not working out at first, but showing signs, their athletic profiles, their wheels, their arm strength, their like they're very similar quarterbacks.
Yeah, and not only that, with Arthur Smith as his offensive coordinator, Tannehill actually put up some better numbers in some of these cases than Ben Roethlisberger did in the twilight of his career. So let that one kind of sink in for you. It doesn't mean that Tannehill's a superior player. It means like it's the same thing. Like if you put Brock Purdy in Pittsburgh, he fails. Yeah. With Matt Canada. I mean, you put Kenny Pickett in San Francisco, I think Kenny Pickett's probably playing in the Super Bowl this weekend too. So it's just a lot of it's opportunity, a lot of it's fit, scheme, etc. So that's about the end of my rant on quarterbacks will be the gift that keeps on giving, right? And we're going to be talking about that. But we were talking about, Derrick Henry. We're talking about Arthur Smith, maybe leaning more on run game, not having to rely on somebody to throw the ball 40, 50 times in a game. But if they had to, they could still scheme up ways to get it done and win football games. Steelers have Najee Harris, and they have Jaylen Warren, a nice 1-2 punch. So where does that leave us? Any room for, how old is Le'Veon Bell now? 50?
35.
Yeah, I'm actually looking it up. I thought he was 31. He is 31. He turns 32 in about a week and a half here on February 18th. So a 32-year-old running back who wasn't in the league the last 2 years and has been basically a practice squad player since 2020, last with the Kansas City Chiefs, Ravens, and then forgot he was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2021. Wants to make a comeback in the NFL. This was like on his Snapchat stories or whatever. And specifically the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, dude, do you forget like how this ended up? So he kind of, I'm trying to find, hold on a second. I was trying to find his exact quote.
Now for the Pittsburgh Steelers, him and AB both, they lifelong Steelers, man. That's one of the funnier story developments of the past season was seeing Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown like talk about the Steelers and use phrases like we and us and showing up at tailgates. I'm like, you guys just forget like how it ended with the two of you. Like they're both lifelong Steelers now. Oh, yeah. Steeler legends.
And he will only play for one team. I was looking for the quote, and I won't start training until like March-ish. And I'm going to be honest with myself. I got to go out there and be like, I'm going to put my foot in the ground. Do I feel it? Am I hurting? Can I go out there and really play? And bro, I'm telling you right now, when I go out there and train in March, and if I hit April and I make the decision to come back and play in the NFL again, mark my words down, I'll be better than I ever was ever. And I'll only come back for that one team. I don't got to say no team. Y'all know who it is. Like he should have said Yins know who it is. But if it's the Steelers and he's not looking for like the 49ers or something to run with CMC after they win a ring, probably. March, dude, that's still a month away. Your ass is 32 years old. What are you waiting for? You need to get on the friggin' hamster wheel right now and start running. Get on that treadmill. You need to look like 50 Cent in that one video, and he's got like all the wires connected to him. Training.
It started last March.
Last March would have probably been even more beneficial for, like, you just can't sit on the couch and eat Cheetos and decide to walk onto an NFL team that already has two good running backs on it. What are you going to offer?
He just tweeted he was smoking weed the other day too.
Like, that may be more acceptable now in the NFL than it was several years ago when he was getting, run through.
Yeah. No, I'm not like coming down on him for that. But that's
but what a positive experience. What a positive role model you want to bring in the locker room to be able to go in and be like, Najee, you got to go get that bag, man. The Jets want to give you that money. You go there, you hold out. You don't come to training camp at all. No, sir. You're not going to sit in now. They're in your fourth final year of your rookie contract. You're not going to sit in for an extension like Deontay or TJ Watt did and show up and still support your teammates. No, you need to go out and jet ski. Hold these MFers hostage until like week 1 of the season, and then go out there and make sure you put up some truly mediocre stats until about October when you decide to really turn it on and you get into football shape. It's like, what are you thinking, dude? It's like, it'd be a feel-good story, but he's 32 years old. Like, I'm not just trying to rag on him, but all the other baggage that comes along with it, and you haven't played. I made the same argument for running backs especially. This would be tough for a wide receiver that would be at the top of their game. There's definitely steps that were lost, and if he wasn't able to carve out any time with the Ravens being a run-first team and the Chiefs being very quarterback poor a couple of years ago and absolutely needing somebody like that on a roster, same thing the Buccaneers had. It's hard to say. It's like that thing where you put on the Superman's cape. Sometimes it is fit, sometimes it's scheme or whatever. And then sometimes, you know what? A lot of these coaches are in the NFL because they actually know what the hell they're doing. And what they're doing is they weren't playing Le'Veon Bell because he was washed and it was over with. Dude, bro, if you were to hear this and you'd be like, the hate mail coming over these fools, he used to block people all the time. Didn't block us. But, like, I loved you and I loved your time in Pittsburgh. We told you not to leave and you would have made more money and everything else. But you got to come to realization that this is a young man's game. I'm not going to go out and play for an NFL team. Flash isn't going to go out and play for an NFL team. If you want to show that you got a little bit out there, you could go out and try and do what Martavis Bryant or some of these guys did and play in the spring leagues, now the UFL, formerly XFL and USFL. But you're probably not going to do that. You made your money already. You don't want to risk getting hurt or embarrassed or anything like that. That's completely understandable. If you end up on a 90-man roster and you try and make it a go, all the more power to you. But really narrowing it down and saying there's only one team you're going to play for probably limits your options right out the gate. This is like the guy that's on the dating apps. It's like, you know what? It looks like she doesn't have 10 toes. I don't like that chick.
You know, girls, you need 6 foot up and only.
Guided, stable with the job and everything. Yeah, you need to be independent, have your own home, have a job, not be living at home with mama and all this. But the checklist then goes like, you need to have dark hair and blue eyes, and you need to be neatly groomed. Flash, you're out, man. You got tattoos. She doesn't want tattoos, ear piercings. You know, the whole 9 yards. It's like that. The guys that are just so picky. You know what I mean? So for some reason, Sir Mix-a-Lot just came in my head, dude. It was like 36, 24, 36, only if she's 5'3", and that's what Le'Veon Bell's doing right here. It's like, that's what I want. 36, 24, 36, only if she's 5'3", only if she's Pittsburgh Steelers. Bro, I hope this is the last we hear of this. He's gonna go out there in March and be like, he's gonna take that first like sprint. He's gonna be like, especially after smoking weed. He's been smoking. He's gonna be like, his lungs are going to be on fire. He's going to be like, nah, screw this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was 25, one of my good friends, the guy who's getting married, his little brother was quarterback for Clarion University. And when I was 25, me and my buddy would go run routes for him, like full speed, you know, make cuts, comeback routes, post routes, fades, slants, everything. In the moment, felt good. And the next morning, it felt like I had been run over by a truck twice over, ran over me, then backed up, back over me. Like, that's what it felt like. Every one of my joints hurt. It felt like something was wrong. Like I actually injured myself. And it was just from running around so fast and like not doing it in so long that, yeah, I can't believe we're actually spending time on this, but credit to Le'Veon for getting his name out there like this. But
I know.
He's got a place in my heart. You know, I don't think he left, even though he did screw the Steelers on a bunch of different levels that you already highlighted, the jet ski and everything, but it wasn't as bad of a departure as Antonio Brown. I still have Le'Veon pretty high up on my baby name list if I ever have a baby. The girlfriend doesn't really jive with that, but we're
a middle name.
Fighting for it.
Maybe a middle name. You get like one of those good, like biblical, one of those good biblical names like Joseph Le'Veon.
Joseph Le'Veon.
Celedonia. Name him. There you go. You can tell the woman that, hey, we'll name the baby after Joe and then Le'Veon Bell. And there you go. I'm sure that'll fly.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that'll do it.
Oh man. Well, I don't know. Do we have that kind of goes into other takes? I don't know if there's anything else that's been floating around there as far as, I don't know. The other takes are, it's like you see a lot of bad ones everywhere. I think the worst is probably the Le'Veon Bell one this week. It's got to be
Le'Veon Bell one. There's a lot of talk about the Steelers expanding their coaching staff, which I'm in favor of. It's good to grow and realize when you have to make adjustments and get with the times, like the Steelers have, to their credit, been doing in their own way these past few seasons. I know people in the Pittsburgh media and other critics want them to just change everything in the blink of an eye, but that's no team really does that. And the Steelers being as old fashioned and as resistant to change as they are, the fact that they've done anything in the past 2 years, i.e., firing Matt Canada, like there's examples, spending more money in free agency, making trades. They've done more in the past few years than they ever have done. And that's great to see. And like I said, I'm in favor of expanding the coaching staff. However, um, and this could age poorly because I'll tell you right now, if they do something like this, I'll be all for it because that's how fans act. But I don't think it's very realistic to believe the Steelers are going to bring somebody in like Eric Bieniemy to be the passing game coordinator. I don't see it, number one, because it would be a demotion for Bieniemy. He's at least been an offensive coordinator for the better part of the past, like his years in Kansas City and his years with the Commanders. I don't know if he would take a passing coordinator job, which seems to be more of like a young man's position, a guy who's trying to ascend and eventually become an offensive coordinator, like Zach Robinson was the Rams passing game coordinator. So I don't know if they would be able. I don't think they will land a guy like Bieniemy to just come in and be like Arthur Smith's assistant and show him like how to pass the ball. Arthur Smith also, I take Arthur Smith as more of like an alpha personality. I don't know if he wants a guy like a pass game coordinator to be helping him with that kind of stuff. I know we need a new quarterback coach, so I'm waiting for that to be announced. But
what makes you say that Sullivan didn't go anywhere? Did he? Did I miss
no,
the
yeah, he's
news?
gone.
Oh, where'd he end up at?
He's just not re-signed right now. He was
Okay.
taking interviews for the Raiders interviewed him for OC and then picked Kingsbury over him, but
and then Kingsbury backed out of that.
Yeah, exactly. So he might still be in consideration for the Raiders job, unless they actually they might have just got somebody. It might sound dumb now. I think they got Luke Getsy to be their offensive coordinator from the Bears now, but to answer your question, Sullivan is out there taking interviews, doing other things.
He is. They still have him. That was like a confusing part for me because he's still listed on the website as a quarterback's coach too. And of course, they had an assistant quarterback's coach, which usually means they have somebody ready to slide in and take the spot. I mean, they weren't. I think if things go a little differently, he was probably in line. They were going to do the whole promote from within because Sullivan has a plethora of experience as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So like much in the same case you're saying with Bieniemy, if he goes somewhere and he's like a passing game coordinator or something like that, like how long does that last for before somebody snatches him up? And I felt like Bieniemy is like a really odd name that hasn't floated around at all this year. Hottest name ever a couple years ago, and that was my case with Arthur Smith. If you could have got like one of the guys that was the hottest name few years ago, the difference is with players versus coaching. The players get older, they lose something diminishes. I don't think with coaching, you would think that experience, you just build on it and then, you ascend instead of descend. It's like a different, what do you want to say, trajectory for coaches versus players. So,
especially if you still have a lot of time left, which like maybe not the same thing for a guy like Frank Reich or Ron Rivera, because they're both like, they're old dudes and like they're towards the end of their NFL coaching careers. Arthur Smith is 41. So yeah, I think he's an example of a guy who, you wanted that experience that he had. And just another reason why he fits, I think, what the Steelers were looking for, even though there's some people in the Pittsburgh media and other places that don't see that or don't want to see that.
Yeah. Final thoughts and hot takes on maybe Pro Bowl. Did you watch any of the stuff that was going on?
They air that at the weirdest times. Like I feel like it's on like in the middle of the afternoon and like during work days too. Like I did see the highlights of Miles Killebrew winning the Pac-Man Jones like punt catching competition. That was cool. And I saw a little bit of the flag football game. And it's cool to see. I think they're slowly doing a good job of getting the Pro Bowl back to like entertaining in a sense. It's never going to be as fun as it was in like the 90s and the early 2000s, but I like the direction they're going in because the throwing competitions are always fun to see.
Yeah.
Those are fun for sure.
Yeah, I like the throwing competition, the moving targets, to try and put it in the bucket all the way at the end or whatever. It's just weird though. There's like no fans at that one. And then some of the events they did do live in the stadium, like they have it set up almost like track and field style. They had
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
tug of war still that was there. Like that's kind of cool seeing those guys. Like it looks like they're at least having fun.
Yeah, the
And
big linemen too. The big linemen going through obstacle courses. That's always fun to see, like, because they're
yeah,
like just big and fat.
I was kind of curious though. It's like, I think it was like, is it like 88,000 and 44,000? It's like half or whatever. It's like in the 80,000 range. I'm like, how much of a paycheck is that for most of the guys at the Pro Bowl are already like multimillionaires? It's like,
Yeah.
that's like a check they get fined for when they have like a bad hit or something, but it seems like there was a little bit of pride there. The Ravens had that celebration with the pick with Kyle Hamilton. I know you were sitting there like, oh, him and Minka are playing safety together, and you had like a little heartbreak thing. But did you see like Minka kind of came over, and I forgot whose kids went out to celebrate in the end zone too, but it was a bunch of Ravens, and Minka kind of came over, bucket hat, very on brand for him, like he is during the summer in Latrobe, and he was just, nah, I ain't doing this. He kind of just quietly walked away. It was funny.
Good.
So,
Yeah, that's what I want to see out of Minka. He's a Steeler through and through.
yes, absolutely. So we'll see though. I don't know. The Pro Bowl, I'm still iffy on it. I wrote like some of my thoughts on it. They were the NFL PR and the events people were like really worried about there being rain during the weekend. I'm like,
Yeah.
It's Orlando. When you go to Disney, like you literally go into Walgreens and they have an aisle just full of ponchos because it rains all the freaking time in Orlando. Like, hello. Like,
it rains every day in Florida.
Yeah, for real.
It's like 5 minutes or 5 hours.
Yeah. So that was my other take was like, like FIFA in the World Cup, they do like a third place game. Like, would people actually want to see, or would players actually want to do that in the NFL? I'll throw that into the comments because it'd be another payday for some guys, but you're also you're risking injury for a game that ultimately means nothing. Somebody can say draft position. It's like, no, players aren't playing, so you could draft somebody to replace them. Like, but it also, like, I think if it was like in the same kind of venue or a remote location and like with the leading up to the Super Bowl, then the Pro Bowl could at least be pushed back after the Super Bowl and you get the guys that played in the Super Bowl as part of it. I think that's where it loses some of its shine, but I don't know how you do that properly. I think you still put players at risk, and ultimately it's like, well, we already know we're not playing in the Super Bowl, so how do you get like the Ravens and Lions would be like a really neat matchup, and you might not have Lamar playing in that game. You know what I mean? It'd be just like
they just gotta
bowl games.
They gotta fork it up. This is the point in a lot of conversations about the NFL where you can't get past, because it's risking their bodies and competing for something that really doesn't matter. So the answer, it always comes back to money. To me, they have to just fork it up and just offer these guys like, hey, we'll double your game check in the regular season if you compete in this like losers bracket of a Super Bowl. It's why the Pro Bowl has suffered so much the past like 20 years. It's because through time, more and more guys have realized like it's not worth it to me to compete. I think the winner of the Pro Bowl gets like what, a $75,000 check, and losers get like
that's where I was at, like 80-ish and 40-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not enough for an NFL player who's already established themselves and made a lot of money. They'll do it, I think, but you have to fork it over.
Yeah, speaking of, this broke is another take. We were just talking about Sullivan, but Frisman Jackson is out as the Steelers wide receiver coach. So that's being reported by Jerry Dulac, the longtime Pittsburgh Post-Gazette beat, covering the Steelers beat. So
that's kind of a long time coming. Nothing against Frisman Jackson, the human being, but the stories that were coming out last year about like Deontay Johnson erupting in meetings and like literally, I heard a story that he like insulted him to his face in front of the other receivers and like walked out of the meeting room. And Pickens obviously is extremely hard to control, and he has done a great job of that. And outside of Pickens like having his few moments this year of doing George Pickens things, the receiving room as a whole just hasn't developed well. Like Calvin Austin, what happened to him? Like he totally disappeared throughout the season. Deontay Johnson has been the same player for the past 3 years. So it's hard to look at how the receiver room has done as a whole and think that Jackson was doing a good job. I don't think he was.
Yeah, and Dulac was also reporting on here. There's uncertainty about Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan, so that kind of goes with what we were saying. We're uncertain even ourselves. And of course, they'll have to replace strength and conditioning coaches as well, which I think that one might be a long time coming. I'm always like, man, the Steelers seem to be getting snake bit all the time. Is that like training or whatever? What a lot of people don't understand is like, postseason, offseason, a lot of that rests on the players. They're not like under anybody's watch. It's up to them to stay in shape and go work on things. That's why you see guys go to Florida, throw the ball with their teammates and stuff. And then also in the postseason, they're not making the same amount of money. So Patrick Mahomes isn't making, his contract was split up over, the 17 games of the season or the 18 weeks. So you get your weekly check or your game check for each week. The playoffs have their own kind of structure and everything. I don't have it in front of me what the Super Bowl makes, but it's in the same kind of figures, tens of thousands, maybe 100,000, 6 figures, 100,000-ish. There's other bonuses that get paid out. So for some of the players that play in those games, a lot of times it's just the prestige. It's not even the money. But for other guys like Brock Purdy, that could represent over 20% of his paycheck because he's making that 7th round money. So
yeah, he has a roommate.
Yeah, get a roommate. Oh, wasn't that the what's the guy's name that was with the Giants? Tommy DeVito or whatever?
Yeah.
It was still his mom was still making him meals or whatever. He's probably living at home there in New York market. That's very understandable. So
hell yeah, for sure.
So yeah, hey Zach, it's good, man. Great having you back, and we'll try and get some more of these. Start looking at some more free agent type stuff. That you're like on the Brian trajectory now, doing weird stuff.
I'm not even doing anything. It's the hand motions, the whatever Skype, whatever we're using, it picks up on hand motions and puts stuff out. And I did 2 thumbs up and fireworks just came up. Now there it is again.
You're gonna have to find those settings, dude. That's hilarious. Well, until next time, folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave us a rating or review wherever you're watching or listening. We appreciate you supporting the Steel City Underground podcast. Maybe come to you later this week or once again early next week as we plug through the offseason. Maybe some Super Bowl takes before we come back around to that. I don't care either way, to be completely honest. I don't want the Niners to have their 6th Super Bowl or whatever, but I don't know. I don't have anything to say about Taylor Swift either, so I really don't care.
Me too, dude. I'm out for a good game.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at, and that's all. What Kansas City Chiefs got 3 Lombardis now. I think that's right.
Yeah, because they had 1 before Mahomes.
So it's as long as the Steelers, nobody gets 7 before the Steelers. We're cool. So that's all I'm worried about. All right. Yep. Till next time, folks. My name's Joe. His name's Zach. We encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.